Hello, I'm Robyn Prokop, and I'm the author of Taelstone, a fantasy novel for young adults and adults, adventure fantasy, and excitingly has just won a bronze medal in the Wishing Shelf Awards for the UK. So that's very exciting. Medal coming, but after lockdown. I'm reading to you today from Nelson in New Zealand. I'm just going to read an extract from the beginning of the book. If you are interested in hearing more, head across to my webpage because I'm going to be popping a full chapter 1 recording there because I'm in the process of looking at audiobook and interested in getting some feedback on my narration particularly. So head over there and you'll find out where you can buy Taelstone from a range of different outlets as well. So I'm going to read to you from chapter 1. It's called The Chosen One. The Chosen One. Lord Lendry frowned, clasped his hands firmly behind his back, and strode a couple of paces. 2 slaves, you say? The petitioner responded with an obsequious nod, although both knew it was nothing of the kind. Lendry blinked rapidly, paused. With an effort, he said, "That seems perfectly agreeable." Lendry's embroidered collar felt chafed at his throat, accentuating the throbbing of his pulse. His armpits prickled with heat, and his mouth was dry. He glanced at the nervous clerk. Not in living memory had the Malshorn been seen in the courts of Milderesh, nor even within the city circle. Up until now, the ancient arrangement had been dealt with discreetly and quietly, with trade being made through messengers sent in secret up the mountain path. Until today, the stories they had related on their return had been deemed the mere babblings of witless slaves. Yet here the Malshorn was. Lendry took a measured breath. The slaves must be young, you say, and required every day, from noon until the twilight bell. Yes, they should come to no harm. Lendry hesitated. He couldn't help thinking the Malshorn's twisted mouth indicated otherwise. And the same goods to be exchanged for their labour? As you like. That is agreeable. It wasn't. I will arrange for 2 of my own slaves to attend upon you. No, the Erock must be of my own choosing. The way the Malshorn's eyes glittered was more than enough to make Lendry waver. He paused for a long moment, but at last he bowed his head in agreement. Reaching for a silver bell, he rang it with as much composure as he could muster. On the entry of the Guardian, he cleared his throat. Take our visitor to the Aryan market. There will be children playing in the squares. Ensure that he finds 2 suitable Erock for his purposes. Only take care not to draw 2 from the same house. It felt strange to use the ancient name. No one really called the slaves Erock anymore. The Guardian nodded, drew his hands together to form the sacred triangle, and bowed his head to his fingertips. Yes, Mildari. The Malshorn smiled, a thin smile. Then he bowed, turned, and glided out of the chamber in one smooth liquid motion. Lendry sank behind his desk. The clerk of the court remained fixed to the spot. Their eyes met in brief recognition of the horror that had passed. Then Lendry drew himself up, smoothed his robes, and straightened his papers. The petitioners kept coming, one after another. They wheedled and pleaded and left with varying degrees of satisfaction, until the line dwindled and finally dried up. At last, the great wooden doors were closed, but Lendry didn't move. The dying sun found him brooding at his desk, head in hands, worrying at the wisdom of his bargain. Across the city, in a broken courtyard, a game of pilat was underway. The courtyard wasn't ideal. It was small, and the withered tree at the centre limited the positioning of the triang. Still, it was out of the way of the bustling marketplaces, and guardians usually turned a blind eye to pilat games. Two latecomers had joined the handful of youngsters loitering in the shade of a crumbling building. Both wore the green tunics of the House of Aranti. The dark-haired girl whispered to her companion, "Look, Pan, Ash is nearly there." The boy screwed up his thin, grubby face. "I can see for myself, Kep. You needn't tell me everything." Kep raised an eyebrow, but turned her attention to the game. "Come on, Ash. This time. This time." It was a tense moment in the second phase. The three defenders were poised, eyes tight shut, straining every other sense to discover their opponent's whereabouts, weapons at the ready. Ash was sprawled flat, so close to the foot of a defender that he could have grabbed an ankle. His grey clothes blended into the dust. Just another stretch of his arm, and he would be able to swap his white stone with the black one between the defender's feet. His face was pressed into the ground. Kep knew he'd been breathing gently to avoid stirring up dust. Her eyes darted to the face of the defending captain. If Bragg signalled to view, Ash's position would be revealed. But for now, he was cocking his head the other way. The two attackers circled, gesturing silently. The captain, Dell, had made her swap and was running distraction. Kep watched Bragg's expression carefully. "Not yet, not yet," Kep whispered. She chewed at the top of her thumbnail as Dell crouched and picked up a stone. "Wait," she breathed. But Dell clicked her tongue twice and lofted the stone. Bragg ignored the click, recognising the ruse, but when the stone thudded softly to his left, he flung out his net. It landed fruitlessly, just as Ash was touching his fingertips to the black stone. Kep winced, counting heartbeats, guessing Bragg couldn't bear to hold the blind. And she was right. Ash barely had time to jerk his arm back before Bragg let out a whistle and called the view. Opening their eyes, the defenders took in the fact that they had lost one stone and had been perilously close to losing another. They glared at one another, but only their captain was entitled to speak. Kep watched Bragg assess his options. He'd be furious at falling for such a simple ploy. The question was, would he make a swap? Khan held a sturdy stick and had another strike, but he wasn't known for his ferocity. Even Ash could probably take a blow from Khan without forfeiting the game. But the other defender was a different sort of boy entirely. He had bright blonde hair and a thin, angular face. He was also armed with a swing stone, which had the greater range. Kep held her breath. "Do you think you'll make the swap?" asked Pan. Kep shook her head slowly. "I don't know." Pan's eyes were worried. "Is it true that Feld sharpens his stone?" It was against the rules, and therefore against the gods, but Feld's stones did seem to cut deeper than anyone else's. Kep didn't want to admit her suspicions. It was too shocking. But Feld, he was a nasty one. She stared at his hard, eager face. "I don't know. I think he does, and I hate him," stated Pan simply. Kep frowned, raising both hands to shield her eyes from the slanting afternoon sun. She knew Bragg wouldn't want to see Ash hurt badly, but she also doubted he would see past his need to win the game. The guardian charged with escorting the Malshorn through the city was trying to locate a group of young slaves, and as quickly as humanly possible. They had certainly made swift progress through the crooked streets. Normally he would have had to push his way through the crowds hollering, "Make way for the High Lord's business!" But today the people fell back to let them through. A collective shudder seemed to sweep through the streets as they passed the fountains and food stalls. Everyone stopped to stare at the Malshorn's long hair and curious robes. But not even the children dared follow in their wake. Finally, after descending a winding staircase, they came out onto a high platform. Below, the result of a pilat game was hanging in the balance. The guardian made to rush down the steps to apprehend the slaves at once, but the Malshorn raised a hand. "Wait. We will watch," he commanded. His escort stood to attention, paralysed. The Malshorn's voice was unpleasantly smooth and liquid. "I do so love pilat. So ancient, so quaint, and somehow so appropriate, don't you think?" The guardian had no idea what he meant. He just blinked his eyes, clenched his jaw, and waited. In the square below, Bragg called the swap. "Feld, for Cairn." Ash groaned, making the dust dance around his lips. As the two defenders traded places, Cairn shot him a look of sympathy. Feld was grinning and adjusting his line. Ash tensed his body, preparing himself to launch out of the way. The urge to roll away before the clap was overwhelming, but there was no greater shame than forfeiting in pilat. The defenders closed their eyes too and raised their weapons, awaiting the restart. Ash clenched his teeth at the sound of the swing stone humming above him. Not even Feld would dare commit sacrilege of striking before the clap, but everyone knew how quick he was. Ash's heart raced as Dell called upon the gods to sanction the restart. "By Telion, by Argus, by Narcissus." When Dell smacked her hands together, Ash rolled to his left, but Feld was too quick. The swing stone came hurtling down, and Ash felt the side of his head explode in a hot rush of pain. He clutched at his ear, rocking himself into a ball. He didn't hear himself cry out, but the defender's whoop of victory said everything. Ash had let his team down again. From above, the Malshorn watched with relish. He saw the sharp-faced boy strike, saw the triumph on his captain's face as he lifted the boy off his feet, and saw the rest of the slaves forming a concerned huddle around the fallen lad in Fiendy grey. He dragged his lips into a hard smile. "Marvellous. I will go down now." He glanced at the trembling guardian. "You should stay here. We don't want you frightening the children." If you'd like to hear the rest of the chapter, hop across to my webpage and check out Taelstone. It's available in all sorts of places. Nice to talk to you.